Well, good afternoon. It is just gone afternoon here at I'm at the Berwick Bandits Speedway Stadium today, as you can see, Sheffield Park in Berwick. And you know how we're always amazed and struck by the resilience of Stephen Avery, what he's had to endure and put up with. As some of you know, my main passion, sporting passion, is actually speedway. I don't always get the chance to go along because of gigging of a Saturday night when Berwick Bandits are racing. But some of the speedway riders are absolutely amazing people. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of them, particularly former Berwick riders, both at the time and since. And as I say, when it comes to toughness, we obviously look at the resilience of Stephen Avery. We're always struck, aren't we, by how small a world we live in. Yesterday, I got a friend request from one of the Berwick legends, the legends of Berwick, a fellow that used to ride for Berwick, along with Berwick as well as Sheffield. He's also synonymous with Sheffield, but he was riding with Berwick when Berwick won the 4-team tournament back in 2012. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, down at Peterborough, because it was a Sunday afternoon at Peterborough, and gigging on a Saturday night isn't always possible to get down there. But I will show you a picture that I have here of Berwick winning the 4-team tournament down at Peterborough, and the Berwick Bandits team on that occasion. David Bellego, Lee Complin, Seb Alden, I think Alex Edberg there. This is Ian Ray, Razor as he's known. I've known him since he was mechanic with Mark Courtney. And here is Ricky Ashworth, Berwick #1, after Berwick won the 4-team tournament, speedway tournament. Berwick don't enjoy much success, and when it comes along, boy, do we like to celebrate. And that was, I've watched the video of it many a time, and it's absolutely fantastic. Anyway, so as I say, Ricky Ashworth, a Berwick legend, got a friend request from him yesterday. And I know I'm friends with a few other speedway riders, people involved in speedway. And I just dropped him a message, say, how are you doing? I saw this great video, which I've put in the link below. In fact, the one I've put in the link is a video done by Jade Ashworth. So forgive my ignorance, Ricky. I'm not sure if that's your mother, wife, sister, daughter, cousin, but anyway. And of course, Jade is not necessarily a female's name. I have no idea. Please forgive my ignorance, but there is a video below to show the recovery. Unfortunately, Ricky had a terrible accident which left him in a coma for 3 months, and he is slowly recovering. And it's a fantastic achievement. As I say, it just shows the resilience of these speedway riders. As I say, Ricky then got back to me and said, well, yeah, that's good, yeah. But I've watched your videos about Stephen Avery, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. So it's very humbling to think that somebody, a legend in the speedway world, is watching carefully what's going on over there in Wisconsin and watching videos. I know that the dude would be very impressed as well, because he was very much into the motorbikes, with the motocross that he used to go and help Steve Hunter with. Anyway, so that's really all I've got to say about that. What a fantastic present it was for me to get a friend request from a Berwick Bandits legend, and then to be told that yeah, he's checked out some of my videos. So very humbling. And as I say, check out the video about Ricky Ashworth, a real legend of the sport. And unfortunately, Speedway is a very dangerous sport. People do get very seriously injured, and some people, that there are occasionally people who don't pull through. I'm reminded most of well, one of the British riders was Lee Richardson, who had a terrible crash in Poland. Luckily, as I say, Ricky is still with us, but I say he was in a coma for 3 months. So check the video out. Let's get on with what I wanted to say before we look at the next part of the motion of stay. In 1995, somebody at the Brown County Sheriff Department, who had obviously spoken with Gregory Allen. Gregory Allen had spoken to somebody at the Brown County Sheriff's Department, I believe Brown County, basically Green Bay. And that person, that officer, having spoken with Gregory Allen, obviously got in touch with Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Andy Colburn took the call. Of course, we don't know if it was a case of the phone call was then forwarded as he had requested to a detective, and what was said in that phone exchange. We don't know if Tom Kasura butted in and said, you know, mind your own business, we've got the right guy, it's nothing to do with you. We just don't know what was said at the time. But what we do know is that this information was sat on until Steve was exonerated in 2003. Now, obviously, it's easy to think of all of the sheriff's departments in Wisconsin as being corrupt, but quite clearly there was somebody in Brown County who felt that there was a moral obligation to get in touch with Manitowoc and let them know that they had the wrong person in for a crime that that there was a very, very strong likelihood that they had somebody in jail for a crime that they had not committed. And when it's as serious as the one that Steve was in prison for, there's not many of those in Manitowoc County. And of course, what was interesting was the timing of that call, as we hear from Glenn and Kelly, was right in the middle of their the appeal process that was ongoing with Stephen Avery. And in fact, we hear, don't we, from Judge Hazelwood, saying that he doesn't know which way to turn, and therefore he upheld the conviction. Presumably that was at the appeal stage. Well, it could have been at the Court of Appeal stage. It doesn't really matter. The point is, what would Glynn and Kelly have made of that information back then? As they were representing Steve, what would they have made of that information? That would have been a game changer, the fact that somebody else had admitted to it. And one suspects that even the state, who were trying to perpetuate this wrongful conviction of Steve at the time, would have said, we've got the wrong guy, if somebody else is admitting to it. And had there been an investigation into Gregory Allen's involvement in it, then quite clearly he would have been exonerated there and then. But as I say, it struck me that whilst we are critical of the corruption in Wisconsin, there are clearly some very good people. Whoever the officer was that made that phone call, fair play to you. You're a good guy. Fast forward 2011. what do we see? The state, the Fallon, Ghan, and Wiegert handing back cremains to the family, the Holbach family, right between Steve's appearance in front of the Court of Appeals and appealing to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Now, I asked Dr. Siltman yesterday, could it have been that in 07, when Sweaty could only spend 20 seconds talking about the bones because they were only possible human, the fact that in 2011 they're being handed back as Teresa's, could they have had undergone some further testing to establish that fact? Whatever the circumstances, this new information that these bones are Teresa's, that would that would be a game changer in 2011. What is the moral obligation of Wiegert, Ghan, and Fallon? Is it to try and get to the truth, or is it to try and sneak behind everybody's backs and not even tell Stephen Avery or his attorneys at the time, Hagopian, I think the name is, it does beg a belief, doesn't it? I mean, if bones that were found, I believe, we saw the photo yesterday. Let's add up. I've tried to do something similar as Millbillies. Let's have a look. I did a sort of measurement on Google Earth. It's 1,000 yards from Steve's burn pit to this, around about where the tubes are for the wind turbines. If we're finding that these bones are Teresa's, to the extent whereby they can hand them back to the Holbach family, where is their moral obligation to try and get to the truth? I think famously in that Greg Davis case, the one lieutenant, the investigator on the stand, is asked, what is your main purpose? What is the purpose of your investigation? And he said, to secure a conviction. To be told by everybody there, no, it's to get to the truth. As I say, if bones that belong to Teresa are 1,000 yards away, that casts huge doubt on Stephen's guilt, in the same way that the phone call in 95 casts huge doubt on Stephen's guilt. Anyway, let's move on and look at the next bit of the motion from Kathleen Zellner, which is what we need to focus on mainly. And I can't stay too long because my StreamYard limit is virtually on the edge, and I've got one more video to do tomorrow, but hopefully I'll be able to squeeze both in. So we got as far as A, materiality. Now, first, the statutes presume that all biological evidence collected in the course of a criminal investigation and covered by the statutes is material. The applicability of either Trombetta or Youngblood depends upon the materiality of the evidence that was lost or destroyed. A hurdle to applying these tests is the impossibility of knowing definitively the material value of evidence that no longer exists. Now, the Supreme Court in Trombetta addressed the difficulty of extrapolating materiality from lost evidence. Quote, courts face the treacherous task of divining the importance of materials whose contents are unknown and very often disputed. Well, I don't think there's any dispute that these are Teresa's bones. Why would they be handing them back? However, in the context of addressing the materiality of evidence destroyed in violation of the Wisconsin statute, the Wisconsin legislature has already resolved that problem, especially when considered together with 97407, the DNA Evidence Preservation Statute demonstrates the Wisconsin legislators' recognition of the importance of post-conviction DNA testing. These statutes, taken together, provide for the preservation of biological evidence and, in many instances, DNA analysis thereof. The codified right to DNA preservation and testing shows the legislative intent to ensure that DNA testing of biological evidence plays a significant role in the suspect's defense and efforts to obtain post-conviction relief. Therefore, the Wisconsin legislature, through the DNA preservation statute, placed preserved biological evidence in the class of evidence the Supreme Court deemed material as defined in Trombetta and Youngblood. Usefulness of evidence preserved under Wisconsin statute. Second, following from this presumption of materiality, the DNA evidence preservation statutes further presume that in every case, biological evidence collected in the course of a criminal investigation is at least potentially useful, as defined in Greenwald. In the context of DNA evidence, apparently exculpatory evidence contemplates instances where results from testing or retesting of biological evidence that excluded the petitioner would exonerate him or her of the crime of conviction. See the National Common of the Future of DNA Evidence, U.S. Department of Justice, post-conviction DNA testing, recommendations for handling requests. Similarly, potentially useful DNA evidence refers to evidence in cases where, if subjected to DNA testing or retesting, exclusionary results would support the petitioner's claim of innocence. In line with the Supreme Court's reasoning in Youngblood, this category includes evidence that was simply an avenue of investigation that might have led in any number of directions. Wow, that's very important. And evidence about which no more can be said than that it could have been subjected to tests, the results of which might have exonerated the defendant. These categorical statements for potentially useful evidence necessarily apply to biological evidence covered by the DNA Evidence Preservation Statute, because preserved evidence test results allow reasonable persons to disagree as to whether the results of DNA testing rule out the possibility of guilt or raise a reasonable doubt of guilt. Therefore, evidence covered under the Biological Evidence Preservation Statute must be deemed at least potentially useful, and the destruction of such evidence triggers, at minimum, the Youngblood due process analysis. The DNA Evidence Preservation Statute presumes that every violation thereof constitutes bad faith. Lastly, because the statutes prescribe the normal course of conduct for Wisconsin law enforcement agencies regarding the collection, preservation, and eventual destruction of biological evidence, every violation of the statutes constitutes bad faith as defined by Youngblood and Greenwald. As the Youngblood Court reasoned that law enforcement actions suggesting bad faith arise when the police themselves, by their conduct, indicate that the evidence could form a basis for exonerating the defendant. This consideration, in turn, hinges on the police's knowledge of the exculpatory value of the evidence at the time it was lost or destroyed. Well, you couldn't put it more simply than that, could you? The fact that the police knew that they were handing back remains of Teresa. In these cases, bad faith exists. So no, it's not a moral obligation to look after the people. Their job, Fallon, Ghan, and Wiegert, was to operate in bad faith. Bad faith exists when the conduct of the police is outside the scope of normal practice. The Youngblood Court's definition of bad faith takes for granted that there are times when the police will not know whether evidence was material before its destruction. The DNA preservation statute eliminates this assumption by creating an affirmative duty to preserve all biological evidence taken from the crime scene. Thus, law enforcement agencies are on notice that biological evidence is deemed important to the successful administration of criminal justice, and therefore may not claim ignorance that the destroyed evidence was at least potentially useful. Wisconsin statute imposes certain duties upon law enforcement agencies. At the most basic level, the state bears a duty to preserve all biological evidence collected during the course of an investigation that leads to a conviction. Additionally, the state sets forth the steps the state must take before lawfully destroying such evidence in its possession. Because a violation of the DNA preservation statute means the state did not abide by either the requirements for preservation or the proper destruction of the evidence as prescribed by law, such conduct indicates bad faith. A violation of the DNA preservation statute constitutes bad faith. This conclusion is not undermined by the Wisconsin Court of Appeals adoption of the official animus standard in Greenwald. The Greenwald Court emphasized that bad faith does not exist when the destruction of evidence was due to inadvertent or negligent actions on the part of law enforcement. However, this exclusion only pertains to two situations where evidence preservation was: one, required by non-codified law enforcement agency policy, or two, not required by any policy. Now, I know that we've got a few more pages to go, so we're going to save some of this for the final part, for hopefully possibly Thursday, when my StreamYard resets. So I'm going to say cheerio, so I don't want to run the risk of running out of time. You know, as I say, it just struck me as being, you know, there's so many parallels. You look back at the fact that, you know, you've got Gregory Allen admitting and then getting in touch with the sheriff's department. You know, Brown County, well done. You did the right thing. You definitely did the right thing. It was those people within the sheriff's department, whoever they were, once Andy Corbin had redirected the phone call, decided to simply sit on it right in the middle of Steve's appeals process. Again, we're right in the middle of Steve's appeals process, and they're handing back bones, which some of which were found 1,000 yards away from Steve's burn pit. And armed with this information would cast the similar doubts over Stephen's guilt. And what do they choose to do? To sneak around, handing back these bones. Okay, let's say, please do check out Ricky Ashworth. I say, when it comes to resilience, we know Steve is resilient. We know that these guys that have been wrongfully convicted, incredibly resilient. But hats off, and you know, Ricky, you're a fantastic inspiration, and I think, you know, in this day and age, we need as much good news as possible, and the fact that you're making such a great recovery is fantastic. So let's say cheerio there, and we'll catch you all again very soon. Bye for now.